They said if you left long enough, the town would forget your name. Emily Carter knew better. In small-town Texas, memories stuck like dust in your boots and regret in your bones. So when her pickup truck rolled through the gates of Carter Ranch, her childhood home, the late afternoon sun seemed to spotlight her for all to see. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The place looked the same and different all at once. The sprawling oaks still guarded the house, but paint peeled from the porch. The barn leaned a little more, the fences patchy where new boards replaced old. But it was the sound that made her heart hammer. The low, restless thunder of horses, the tense murmurs of a gathered crowd, and the sharp bellow of an auctioneer's voice cutting through the air. She parked by the side of the old tool shed, bracing herself. She wasn't ready, but she was here. For Briscoe. For the horse everyone called Damaged, the legend her mother had loved. The stallion now minutes from being sold for slaughter. Emily strode toward the ring, her boots crunching the gravel. Heads turned. There was Mrs. Lambert from the feed store, whispering behind her hand. Mr. Redford, her 8th-grade teacher, squinting through his glasses, Sheriff Daniels chewing on a toothpick. They all watched her, some with surprise, others with something darker. And there was her father. Henry Carter stood tall at the edge of the auction ring, arms crossed, jaw set like granite. He hadn't changed, not really. He wore his grief like a badge, and his anger like a shield. Emily swallowed. They hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since she left after her mother's funeral, unable to bear the empty house and her father's silence. But none of it mattered now. She pushed through the crowd, eyes fixed on the center of the pen. Briscoe. The stallion stood alone, muscles tensed, ears flat. Scars crisscrossed his flanks. Bad memories from a storm, the town gossiped. Or maybe from the day Emily's mother died. He pawed the dirt, black mane wild, eyes rolling. Men hung back, wary. Someone shouted, "He's a lost cause, Henry. Get what you can and let him go." The auctioneer slammed his gavel. "All right, folks, next up, the Carter Stallion, Briscoe. Starting at 500? Do I hear 5? 550? A murmur rippled. Bidders hesitated, not eager for trouble. Emily's heart twisted. She saw the kill buyer at the edge of the ring, already reaching for his checkbook. She stepped forward, voice ringing out. "Stop." The crowd stilled. The auctioneer looked at her, blinking. "Miss, you got something to say?" Emily forced herself to stand taller. "You can't sell him. Briscoe stays with the Carters. That's what Mom would have wanted." Henry's face flushed. "Emily, don't—" "I will!" she cut in, anger flaring. "You can't do this! He's family, Dad! You know he is!" People started muttering. Some voices called out in support. Others jeered. "She's been gone for years. She doesn't get a say." Henry tried to shut her down, voice strained. "You left, Em. This isn't your fight." She shook her head. "It's always been my fight, just like it was Mom's." The auctioneer cleared his throat, nervous. "Henry, what's this about? The horse is on the block. Are we bidding or not?" Henry stared at Emily, eyes burning with something between pain and pride, but he didn't answer. Emily turned to the crowd, desperation rising. "If any of you ever cared about my mom, about this ranch, don't let him go to slaughter." A silence hung heavy. For a moment, even Briscoe seemed to pause, nostrils flaring, dark eyes searching the faces. Then, from the back, a thin voice spoke up. Maggie, Emily's little sister, barely 15, cheeks flushed. She tugged her sleeve. "Emily, be careful." The crowd pressed closer, whispers swirling. The tension was thick as oil. The kill buyer growled, "Let the girl try. Horse'll kill her too." Emily squared her shoulders, stepping into the ring. Her father's hand shot out, hesitated, then dropped, torn between love and fear. She faced Briscoe, remembering the lullabies her mother used to sing when storms rattled the windows, and Briscoe panicked in his stall. The horse snorted, stamping. Emily closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She sang, voice trembling at first, then stronger, "Home, home on the range." The words floated over the ring, soft and steady. Briscoe tossed his head, uncertain. The crowd held its breath. Emily kept singing, taking another step, then another. Briscoe reared, hooves slicing the air. Someone shouted, "Get out of there!" Emily stood her ground, voice cracking but refusing to falter. She remembered her mother's hand in hers, the smell of hay and sunshine, the sound of hope in a broken world. The stallion landed hard, panting. Emily kept singing, soft as a secret. Finally, Briscoe lowered his head. Ears twitching. Inch by inch, he stepped closer until his battered nose brushed Emily's shoulder. Gasps erupted. Emily stroked his neck, tears sliding down her face. "He remembers me," she whispered. Henry sagged, defeated, but something broke in his eyes. A flicker of hope, a memory of the man he once was. Emily faced the crowd, her hand never leaving Briscoe's mane. "He's not broken," she said quietly. "He just needed someone to believe in him." In that moment, the Carter's fate, and Briscoe's, shifted. The auction was over, but the real fight had just begun. The auction yard emptied slowly, leaving behind a hum of uneasy excitement and the tang of dust and sweat. Emily lingered in the fading light, the adrenaline not yet leaving her bones. Briscoe's head still rested against her shoulder, warm and surprisingly gentle, as if the years apart had melted in an instant. But the danger was far from over. A few townsfolk hung back, whispering, staring at the girl who had just walked into the lion's den. Maggie stood close by the rail, her blue eyes wide with worry, clutching a threadbare jacket against her chest. Even Henry, for all his stubbornness, lingered at the edge of the crowd, unable to look away. Emily's resolve was tested as the sheriff approached, boots thudding heavy on the packed dirt. "Emily, I can't let you take him out of here till the paperwork's settled," Sheriff Daniels said, his tone gentle but firm. "Your daddy needs to sign, and, truth be told, the town don't want no trouble with Briscoe loose." Emily nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. Briscoe's violent reputation was no rumor. Just last week, he'd kicked through a stall door, nearly injuring the ranch hand. Emily could still see the wary glances from folks who'd once celebrated her as the Carter girl, the one with the magic touch. "I need to see him alone," she said, voice steady. "He won't hurt me." Daniels exchanged a look with Henry. The old man said nothing, but Emily saw the twitch in his jaw. She took a deep breath, releasing Briscoe's halter with a gentle tug. The crowd parted as she led him away, whispering behind her back. They entered the pen, dust swirling around them. The space felt both cavernous and claustrophobic, a stage set for judgment. Briscoe snorted, rolling his eyes, hooves stomping, as if remembering the pain of loss and betrayal. Emily stood tall, though her heart thudded against her ribs. "You remember me, don't you, big guy?" she murmured, smoothing her palm down his scarred neck. "It's okay. I'm not going anywhere this time." Suddenly, Briscoe shied, nostrils flaring, as if some shadow from the past darted across his memory. He spun, powerful muscles coiled for flight, kicking up dirt and hay. The noise startled Maggie, who gasped, "Emily?" But Emily didn't flinch. She held her ground, hands up, soft words flowing. "Easy, easy. Briscoe." He circled her, snorting, every sinew taut with tension. One wrong move and she'd be thrown or trampled. The onlookers outside the pen pressed closer, breathless, half expecting disaster. Emily felt every eye on her, every ounce of doubt. In that moment, she remembered a night years ago. A wild storm, thunder shaking the barn, her mother's arms around her, both of them singing while Briscoe thrashed in terror. Emily drew in a shaky breath, letting the memory steady her. She started humming, the same gentle lullaby her mother once sang. Briscoe froze, head tilting. For a second, the world shrank to just them. Horse and girl, loss and hope. Emily sang softly, voice trembling, coaxing the stallion back from the edge. Home. Home on the range. His ears twitched. Emily moved with slow, deliberate steps, never breaking eye contact. She kept her voice low, soothing, pushing past her own fear. Briscoe's muscles rippled, sweat glistening on his flanks. He pawed the ground once, twice, then let out a heavy breath. Emily reached out, palm up. Briscoe hesitated, then, with a shuddering sigh, stepped forward, pressing his muzzle into her hand. The crowd outside let out a collective gasp. Someone started to clap, quickly muffled by the sheriff's stern glance. Henry's face softened, lines of worry etched deep but melting away just a little. Even he couldn't hide the spark of pride, though he tried. Maggie, tears brimming, grinned for the first time that day. Emily stroked Briscoe's face, whispering, "That's it, buddy. I'm here." Suddenly, a noise behind them, a dropped bucket, a sharp metallic clang, startled Briscoe. The stallion jolted, rearing up. Emily's heart leapt to her throat. She stood her ground, singing louder, her voice barely steady. Briscoe's front hooves hit the ground with a crack, missing her by inches. But Emily didn't back away. Instead, she leaned into the moment, pressing her forehead to his broad chest. Briscoe's shudders eased. Emily's shirt dampened with his sweat. In that fragile silence, trust was reborn. Sheriff Daniels spoke up, voice choked. "Haven't seen anything like that since your mother." Emily looked up, cheeks flushed, but her eyes clear. "Briscoe's not a lost cause. He's scared. He needs someone who won't give up on him." Henry cleared his throat, struggling to find words. He never let anyone that close since the accident. Emily nodded, biting her lip. "He remembers love, Dad. That's all any of us need." The crowd, once full of skeptics and gossip, broke into scattered applause. The kill buyer stormed off, cursing under his breath, while Maggie ran into the pen, hugging Emily tight. "Emily, you did it," Maggie whispered, trembling. Emily hugged her back, Briscoe snorting softly as if accepting both sisters as his herd. She could feel the eyes of the town on her, but for the first time, she didn't care. The bond was back, frail, but real. Henry lingered by the fence, hands clenched, then quietly turned away. Emily watched him go, her chest aching. But something had shifted. She led Briscoe out of the ring, Maggie by her side, ready to face whatever would come next. As the evening sky bled orange over the Carter Ranch, Emily knew the real work had only just begun. Night fell slow and gentle over Carter Ranch, blanketing the fields in velvet shadows and silver moonlight. Inside the weathered old barn, Emily moved quietly, her every step mindful of the fragile peace she'd brokered just hours before. The rush of the auction had faded, replaced by a deep, exhausted calm. Out here, away from the judgmental eyes of the town and the heavy silence of her father's house, Emily found herself breathing easier. Briscoe stood in the corner stall, muscles still taut, dark eyes tracking her every move. The scars along his shoulders and hindquarters looked raw in the low light, reminders of violence and neglect. Emily bit back the urge to cry. She wouldn't let him see her break. Maggie slipped in behind her, arms loaded with blankets and a battered first aid kit. She moved quietly, careful not to spook Briscoe. At 15, Maggie was the shadow Emily hadn't known she'd missed. A slim, stubborn girl with her mother's stubborn jaw and the faintest glimmer of hope in her blue eyes. "Is he okay?" Maggie whispered, peering at the horse through the slats. Emily nodded, her voice soft. "He's scared. We all are. But he'll be okay." They worked together in silence, their movements almost ritualistic. Emily spoke to Briscoe in a low, soothing murmur as she cleaned the old wounds, washing away the grime and dried blood. The stallion flinched, but did not kick. Maggie handed her fresh bandages, holding the lantern high. The shadows flickered and danced on the wooden beams. "He looks worse than I remember," Maggie said, voice trembling. "Why would Dad let him get like this?" Emily pressed her lips together, carefully wrapping a clean gauze around Briscoe's foreleg. "Sometimes, when people hurt, they hurt others too, even if they don't mean to." Maggie was quiet, watching Emily's hands work. The barn smelled of hay and iodine, sweat and old memories. A gentle breeze carried in the scent of wildflowers, half wilted at the edge of the corral. After they finished, Emily spread an old quilt in the straw and collapsed next to Briscoe, who snorted and nudged her shoulder. Maggie curled up beside her, silent for a long time. Above them, the roof creaked, the familiar sound oddly comforting. The world outside felt far away. "Do you remember when Mom used to sneak us out here at night?" Maggie asked, her voice barely more than a breath. Emily smiled, a real, soft thing. "Yeah. She'd bring that old thermos of cocoa, and we'd sit on the fence, counting shooting stars. She always said the barn was magic at night." "I wish she was still here," Maggie whispered. Emily wrapped an arm around her sister, feeling her tremble. "Me too. Every day." For a while they sat in silence, letting the grief settle between them like dust. Briscoe nickered, as if remembering the same soft hands and kind words from years past. Emily stroked his nose, letting the rhythm of the motion steady her heart. "We can't fix everything," Emily said quietly. "But we can start here, with him, with us." Maggie nodded, wiping at her cheeks. "I want to help." "You already are," Emily said, squeezing her hand. They talked long into the night, the words coming easier in the soft dark. Emily told Maggie stories of their mother, how she'd rescued Briscoe from a wild herd, how she'd tamed him with patience and music instead of force. Maggie shared her own memories, the little things she'd never dared speak out loud. Sneaking sugar cubes, learning to braid Briscoe's mane, the warmth of their mother's laughter echoing through the barn. Slowly, the sisters' bond, frayed by time and tragedy, began to mend. Briscoe, sensing the shift, lowered himself to the straw beside them, great head resting near their feet. His breathing slowed, deep and even. Outside, the night creatures sang, a chorus of crickets and the distant bark of a coyote. Emily felt herself drifting, wrapped in the warmth of family, of possibility. For the first time in a long while, she let herself believe they could build something new from the ruins of their old life. In the early hours, Maggie fell asleep, curled tight against Emily's side. Emily lay awake, tracing the outline of the rafters overhead, listening to Briscoe's steady breath. Her mind wandered back to a different night, the last night before everything changed. Her mother's hands in her hair, the promise that there's nothing broken that can't be healed, if you're willing to try. That hope was all Emily had left. She watched Maggie sleep, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and promised herself, promised her mother, that she wouldn't run again. When dawn broke, it crept soft and pink through the cracks in the barn wall. Emily sat up, stiff and sore, but lighter somehow. Maggie stirred beside her, blinking sleepily. "Do you think he'll ever be the same?" Maggie asked. Emily glanced at Briscoe, who stood to greet the new day, shaking his mane. "No, but maybe he'll be something even better." They laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. The healing had begun, not just for Briscoe, but for the Carters, too. The mornings at Carter Ranch had always started early, but now, with Emily back and Briscoe's fate changed, each sunrise felt both familiar and uncertain. Emily and Maggie fell into a gentle rhythm, rising before the rooster's crow to tend to Briscoe and the handful of remaining horses that still called the ranch home. Emily noticed the little things first. A fresh bale of hay left by the barn door before she and Maggie arrived. Clean towels neatly folded and a sack of oats leaning against the stall, always before dawn. No one ever claimed credit, but Emily knew. Her father was watching, helping from the shadows. Henry Carter still carried himself like a man made of stone, but the cracks in his armor were starting to show. He rarely spoke at breakfast, sitting stiff and silent while Emily and Maggie filled the room with cautious conversation. Yet some mornings, she'd catch him staring out the window toward the barn, coffee cooling in his hand, the pain in his eyes softening just a little. One evening, after a long day mending fences and working Briscoe, Emily climbed the attic stairs, searching for spare blankets. Dust motes danced in the thin beams of sunlight slanting through the tiny window. She coughed. Brushing past boxes of old Christmas decorations and forgotten trophies. Then, at the bottom of a trunk stuffed with moth-eaten quilts, her fingers closed around something cool and leather-bound. She drew out an old journal, the initials A.C., Anna Carter, embossed on the cover in faded gold. Emily's breath caught. Her mother's journal. Heart pounding, Emily brought it down to Maggie, who was peeling potatoes at the kitchen table. The two girls huddled together, flipping through the pages. Inside, their mother's neat script flowed, each word echoing with warmth and gentle wisdom. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice. Sometimes it looks like letting go. But more often, it's choosing to stay, even when it's hard. Briscoe isn't just a horse. He's part of our family. Forgiveness is the only thing that heals wounds this deep. Maggie traced her fingers along the words. She wrote about Briscoe, about us. All this time, she knew. Emily swallowed hard, blinking back tears. She wanted us to forgive each other and ourselves. She saw things none of us could admit. The journal was full of small stories. How Anna rescued Briscoe from a storm when he was just a foal. How Henry once stayed up all night with a sick calf. How the girls used to race barefoot through the orchard. But there was something else. An undercurrent of hope, even in the darkest entries. Hints of a family secret. Something their mother never had the chance to say out loud. That night, For the first time in years, Henry joined them at the dinner table. He sat quietly at first, head bowed, but Emily saw him watching the two sisters share the journal. She slid it across the table, her hand trembling just slightly. "Dad, did you know she kept this?" Emily asked. Henry's hands trembled as he touched the cover. She wrote everything down, said it helped her see things clear. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. Then, surprising both girls, Henry began to speak, his voice low, rough as gravel. "Your mother was the best of us. She never gave up on anything. Not the ranch, not Briscoe, not me. I let her down. I let all of you down." Emily reached for his hand, fingers threading through his. "You're here now, Dad. That's what matters." Maggie, eyes shining, nodded. "We can fix this. Together." The next few days brought quiet change. The family began eating together each night. The conversation awkward at first, but growing more natural as memories, laughter, and gentle teasing returned. Emily and Maggie would read from Anna's journal after dinner, each passage sparking a story, a confession, or a long-held regret. The wounds were still there, but each meal softened the edges a little more. Emily found herself confiding in her father again, sharing her fears about Briscoe, about failing to live up to her mother's legacy. Henry, in turn, opened up about his own regrets, how he pushed Emily away after Anna died, how he believed keeping distance would protect everyone from more pain. But as he spoke, his eyes lingered on Briscoe's empty halter hanging by the door, and Emily saw hope flicker there. Maggie, shy but determined, took charge of the barn, tending to the other horses with newfound confidence. She and Emily painted the fences white, their hands stained and their laughter echoing down the driveway. On weekends, Henry began joining them, muttering about getting it done right, but lingering longer each time. The biggest shift came the night a thunderstorm rolled across the plains. The rain battered the roof, wind howled through the trees, and for a moment, Emily feared Briscoe might panic again, tearing apart all the progress they'd made. She rushed to the barn, finding Maggie already there, arms wrapped around the trembling stallion. Together they soothed him, singing quietly, the way their mother used to do. Later, as the rain eased and the world grew quiet, Emily looked at her little sister, her courage, her hope, and felt something deep within her begin to heal. The family wasn't whole, not yet. But for the first time in years, they were together, bound by love, forgiveness, and the memories of a woman who had always believed broken things could be made new. Texas storms didn't give warnings. They swept in with a fury, bending trees and turning daylight into dusk. The sky above Carter Ranch bruised purple and gray, wind lashing the fields and rattling the windows in their frames. Inside the barn, Emily and Maggie scrambled, rushing to bring the horses in before the worst hit. Briscoe stomped restlessly in his stall, the air thick with static. Emily could feel his nerves in every sharp breath, every wild glance at the flashing sky. Maggie ran from stall to stall, her hands shaking but determined, her voice echoing above the wind. "Easy, girl. Easy," she soothed an old mare, coaxing her to safety. Suddenly, the first clap of thunder split the sky, shaking the rafters. Briscoe reared, slamming against the wooden boards. Emily's heart skipped. "Maggie, get back!" she called, struggling to latch Briscoe's gate. But another bolt of lightning struck nearby, and the horses panicked, eyes wide and rolling. The old barn, patched and weary, couldn't take the strain. With a groan, the western wall buckled, sending rain and debris crashing inside. Maggie screamed as a loose beam tumbled toward her. In a heartbeat, Briscoe tore free from his stall, charging toward the chaos. "Emily!" Maggie cried, frozen beneath the falling beam. Without thinking, Emily vaulted over the stall door. But Briscoe was faster. The stallion surged between Maggie and the collapsing timber, planting his body as a shield. The beam crashed across his back, pinning him, but Maggie scrambled free, heart pounding, hair plastered to her face with rain and tears. "Briscoe, no!" Emily rushed to his side. The stallion lay shuddering, nostrils flaring, legs kicking feebly in the straw. Rain pounded through the broken roof, soaking them all. Emily threw her weight against the beam, Maggie pushing beside her, muscles straining with desperation and fear. Finally, with a groan, the wood shifted just enough. Briscoe rolled free, battered but alive. The storm howled on. Emily grabbed Maggie's hand, dragging her out of the collapsing barn as Henry appeared through the downpour, flashlight in hand, face white with terror. "Dad!" Maggie sobbed, running to him. Henry swept both girls into his arms, ignoring the rain and the mud. Emily looked back to see Briscoe limping after them, bloody but unbroken, eyes fixed on Maggie as if making sure she was safe. They huddled in the old pickup while the worst of the storm passed, lightning sketching the ranch in brief, violent flashes. None of them spoke, hearts hammering, adrenaline still burning through their veins. When the storm finally died, the ranch was a mess of broken fence lines, scattered shingles, and knee-deep mud. But the barn still stood, battered and leaking, and Briscoe limped at Maggie's side, refusing to be led away. Henry squeezed Emily's shoulder as they walked the ruined property together. "He saved her life. That horse, he's something else." Emily nodded, unable to speak. The words caught somewhere between relief and awe. For all the pain, for all the fear, Briscoe had done what no one else could. He'd protected the last piece of their family. The next morning, the sun broke through in golden shards, illuminating the damage with painful clarity. Emily and Maggie started cleaning the barn, shoveling out waterlogged straw and broken boards. As they worked, Maggie's voice was quiet but determined. "He didn't even hesitate, Em. He just saved me." Emily hugged her tight. "He's part of us. That's what Mom always said." They worked side by side until midday, when Maggie called out from the far side of the loft. "Emily, come here!" Emily climbed the rickety ladder, her hands slick with sweat and grime. Maggie pointed to a cracked rafter, a thin envelope wedged tight into the seam between wood and old hay. They pried it loose together, dust motes swirling in the beam of sunlight. The envelope was yellowed, the edges curled, but their mother's handwriting was clear. "For my girls, if the day ever comes." Emily's fingers shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a letter. The ink faded but still strong. "My beautiful daughters, if you find this, it means you're searching for something only you can give each other. Forgiveness. I hope the ranch is still standing, and Briscoe is still with you. He was never just a horse. He was always meant to be the bridge. I pray you find the strength to heal. Not just for me, but for yourselves. Remember, storms pass. Love remains." "All my heart," Mom Maggie started crying, her tears silent at first, then bursting like the rain outside. Emily pressed her close, reading the words again and again, letting each sentence wrap around her like a quilt. They showed the letter to Henry at supper, his face crumpling as he read. For a long moment, the only sound in the house was the wind at the window and Briscoe's soft wicker outside. "We'll fix the barn," Henry said, voice thick. We'll fix everything. From that day, the letter sat on the kitchen table, a reminder of hope and the power of second chances. Emily knew the real work was just beginning, but she felt her mother's love in every task, every moment of laughter, every time Briscoe nuzzled Maggie with gentle eyes. The Carters would protect Briscoe at all costs. He was their legacy, their healer, and their bridge. And now, with the past unearthed and the family drawing close again, Emily understood. Their story was far from over. The days after the storm dawned bright and gold, but the ranch bore scars, broken fence rails, shingles scattered across the fields, puddles glinting in the ruts. Yet somehow, the chaos felt cleansing. Each day, Emily, Maggie, and Henry rebuilt a little more. Patching, hauling, laughing through exhaustion. The pain wasn't gone, but hope had planted itself like stubborn grass in the Texas clay. Briscoe moved stiffly, but healed quickly under Emily and Maggie's watchful care. The stallion was never far from their sides, following the sisters like a loyal shadow. His coat, once dull and scarred, began to shine in the sunlight, and the deep distrust in his eyes faded, replaced by curiosity, and at times, mischief. One morning, while cleaning the tack room, Emily found their mother's journal resting atop a stack of worn saddle blankets. She thumbed through the pages, lingering on an entry she'd somehow missed. Take them to the old family cemetery at sunrise. There's a lesson there, one about second chances. Briscoe will know the way. The words stirred something in Emily, a yearning for closure, for connection, for whatever her mother meant by second chances. She showed the entry to Maggie that night, and the girls planned their journey. Before dawn, the air sharp with dew and promise, Emily saddled Briscoe and packed a blanket, a thermos of cocoa, and their mother's journal. Maggie clambered up behind her, arms tight around Emily's waist, a spark of excitement chasing away sleepiness. Henry stood in the yard, arms crossed, watching the sisters with a look both proud and haunted. "Be careful," he called, his voice rough. "Stick to the river trail, and if Briscoe spooks you—" "We know, Dad," Maggie cut in, a rare smile lighting her face. "We'll be safe." Briscoe snorted, as if eager to prove himself. Emily clicked her tongue, and the stallion surged forward, hooves thudding softly against the damp ground. They slipped out of the sleeping ranch, past the orchard, through a break in the fence where wildflowers tangled with last night's storm debris. The ride was silent, save for birdsong and the distant bark of a dog. Dawn spread rose and gold across the land. Maggie pressed her face to Emily's back, sighing in contentment. "I can't remember the last time we did this." Emily nodded, tightening her hold on the reins. "Feels like forever, but we're here now." Briscoe seemed to sense the importance of their journey, ears forward, pace steady. The river glimmered alongside them, swollen from the storm, but peaceful. They crossed at the shallows, water splashing against Briscoe's legs, the sisters giggling as droplets hit their boots. Beyond the river, the trail wound through a grove of pecan trees and into a hidden pasture where the family cemetery lay, enclosed by a weathered stone wall. Emily slid off Briscoe, helping Maggie dismount. They stood together, staring at the old wrought-iron gate. Morning light shimmered on the faded letters. Carter family. Emily led the way, her heart thudding with nerves and nostalgia. Rows of crooked stones marked generations of Carters, men and women who'd built and lost, loved and grieved on this very land. Maggie found their mother's grave, kneeling in the soft grass, tracing the name with her fingertips. "She's really here," Maggie whispered. "It feels different than before." like she's close. Emily sat beside her, opening the journal. She read aloud the entry about second chances, her voice trembling. The words wrapped around them like the morning sun. Then, following a half-remembered story from childhood, Emily searched the edge of the cemetery for the grave of their mother's first horse. Star, the wild filly Anna Carter had tamed as a girl. There, half buried under moss and thyme, was a small stone marked with a crudely etched horse's head. Kneeling, Emily brushed away the leaves and spotted something wedged into the earth, a rusted tin box, barely visible. Heart pounding, she dug it free, prying open the lid with shaking hands. Inside were faded photographs, a young Anna astride Star, Henry laughing beside her, the girls as toddlers riding Briscoe's back under watchful parental eyes. Maggie gasped, lifting a folded paper from the box. It was a letter, written in their mother's looping hand. If you're reading this, you found what matters most: each other. Life is made of second chances. Don't waste them holding on to pain or regret. Forgive, love, begin again, over and over if you must. That's how you honor what came before. Tears slid silently down Maggie's face. Emily squeezed her sister's hand, letting the letter's truth settle in her heart. For a long time, they sat together, sharing stories and memories, laughter and tears. The pain of loss didn't vanish, but it changed shape. Softer now, colored by gratitude as much as grief. Before leaving, Emily took a photo of her and Maggie, arms around each other, Briscoe's big head nuzzling in, the old graves behind them. She tucked it into the tin box, closing it for whoever came after. As they rode home, the sisters felt lighter, a new understanding blooming between them. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other. And for the first time since their mother's death, Emily truly believed in second chances. When they returned to the ranch, Henry was waiting, concern etched in his brow. But when he saw the peace on their faces and the gentle way Briscoe carried Maggie, some of his old hardness melted away. The day ended with the Carters sitting on the porch, passing around their mother's photographs and letters, weaving old stories with new hopes. Above them, the Texas sky stretched wide and endless, promising another sunrise, another beginning. Storm clouds threatened on the horizon again, but this time, it wasn't the weather churning up the past. It was something deeper, an old pain Emily knew they couldn't outrun any longer. Since the sunrise ride to the family cemetery, the atmosphere in the Carter house had shifted. The healing was real, but so was the tension that came with old wounds reopening. Emily sat on the porch swing that evening, journal in her lap, the tin box of old photos balanced at her feet. She listened to the crickets, feeling both comforted and restless. Briscoe grazed quietly in the paddock nearby, while Maggie sat cross-legged on the steps, humming a song their mother used to sing. Suddenly the screen door banged open, and Henry strode out, face shadowed and tight. He paused at the edge of the porch, arms folded across his chest, eyes locked on a sky going purple with dusk. Emily tensed, sensing a storm within him that needed to break. "Emily," Henry said, his voice rough as gravel, "we need to talk." Maggie looked up, her blue eyes wide with worry. Emily nodded, bracing herself. "All right." Henry didn't sit. He hovered, pacing like a caged animal fighting for words. For a long moment, the only sound was the low whinny of Briscoe as he lifted his head, watching the family from across the yard. "I followed you this morning," Henry finally said, his tone half apology, half challenge. "Saw you at the cemetery. saw what you found. Emily's heart skipped. She looked down at the journal, then up at her father. We needed answers, Dad. We needed her. Henry's jaw clenched, his knuckles white. I know, he said, voice cracking. But I couldn't give them to you. I didn't know how. The words tumbled out, as if years of silence and shame had finally reached their boiling point. Henry sank heavily onto the steps beside Maggie, his head in his hands. You think I was angry at Briscoe, he muttered. You think I blamed him for what happened to your mother. But I didn't. Not really. Maggie crept closer, her small hand resting on her father's knee. Emily held her breath. I blame myself, Henry said, the confession raw and halting. The day your mother died, I should have been there. I should have stopped her from going into that pasture alone. I should have known Briscoe was spooked, but I was stubborn. I thought I could fix everything later. And then, he broke off, swallowing hard. She was gone. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Dad, you can't keep punishing yourself. None of us can. Henry looked up, eyes shining in the gathering dark. When you left Emily, I wasn't mad at you. I was mad at myself. I pushed you away because I couldn't stand to see her in you. Every time you looked at me, it was like she was asking why I didn't save her. The words hit Emily like a fist. She felt every mile she'd run from home, every sleepless night replaying the accident, every hard silence at the dinner table. I thought you hated me, she whispered. I thought you blamed me for leaving. Henry shook his head, tears streaking the dirt on his cheeks. No, never. I just didn't know how to hold on to you without falling apart. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Maggie crawled into her father's lap, her thin arms wrapping around his neck. Henry hugged her fiercely, rocking her like she was still small enough to fit in the crook of his arm. Emily slid down next to them, resting her head on Henry's shoulder. They stayed that way, a tangle of grief and forgiveness, letting the night fall around them. Across the yard, Briscoe wandered closer, ears flicking. He approached the porch, nose brushing Henry's boot, as if to remind him that he too was family. Henry reached out, tentative at first, then more certain, stroking Briscoe's broad forehead. I never hated you, boy, Henry murmured to the stallion. I was just scared of losing everything I loved. Emily squeezed his hand. You haven't lost us, Dad. We're here. Maggie nodded, wiping her tears away. We're together now. In that quiet, broken moment, something changed. The old hurts didn't vanish, but they loosened their grip, making room for something new. The Carters, father, daughters, and horse, leaned into each other, finding strength in their shared sorrow. The porch light flickered on, casting a warm glow over the family. Emily breathed in the scent of summer grass, horse sweat, and home. She thought of her mother, of her gentle voice and strong hands, of the way she'd always believed forgiveness was the bravest thing a person could offer. The family stayed out long after the stars came out, telling stories, sharing memories, and planning for the days ahead. They promised each other, out loud for the first time, to keep the ranch, to protect Briscoe, and to try again, no matter how many times it took. And as Briscoe lay down in the grass at their feet, Emily knew her mother would be proud. The Carter family, battered and scarred, had finally found their way back to each other. The days that followed Henry's confession moved with a different energy, a soft, expectant hum that seemed to fill every room, every field, every quiet morning at Carter Ranch. For the first time in years, the Carters woke up not just as survivors of loss, but as a family. Their wounds remained, but the act of finally sharing their pain had opened the door to something none of them had dared to hope for: a future. Emily poured herself into work, but it was no longer an act of desperate distraction. With Maggie and Henry by her side, she drew up plans to restore the ranch, not for the old dream of turning a profit, but to honor the deeper, more beautiful vision their mother had left them. Over breakfast, they talked about ideas, how the land could become a place of healing, a sanctuary for animals and people alike. Briscoe became the symbol of that hope. News of the Carter stallions' miraculous recovery and heroics during the storm spread through the town, carried by whispers and awe. Neighbors dropped by with fresh bales of hay, old friends offered to help repair fences, and folks who'd once doubted the family's resolve now stopped to see the legendary horse for themselves. On a Saturday morning, with the barn roof finally patched and the sun streaming in through clean windows, Emily tacked up Briscoe for a different kind of ride. Maggie stood in the yard, clipboard in hand, ticking off names of local children who'd come to visit. Among them were kids who struggled at home, quiet, withdrawn, or simply afraid. They gathered by the fence, clutching slips of paper with their names and sometimes their fears. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her mother's legacy. She led Briscoe to the fence and knelt beside a small boy named Jesse, whose eyes never left the ground. "You want to meet Briscoe?" Emily asked gently. Jesse hesitated, then nodded. Emily held out her hand, palm up, just as her mother once taught her. Briscoe, calm and patient, lowered his head. Jesse reached out, trembling, and touched the horse's nose. Briscoe stood still, blowing softly, and Jesse's face broke into a smile, small at first, then shining. The moment rippled through the gathered children, courage spreading like dawn. One by one, they stepped forward, each encounter a tiny miracle. Emily watched Briscoe work his own kind of therapy, ears flicking, eyes soft, standing solid and steady as trembling hands brushed his coat. It was as if he understood what each child needed: patience, gentleness, and a living reminder that even the most wounded among them could heal. After the children, a group of local veterans visited the ranch at the suggestion of a town councilor. Emily was nervous, unsure if the therapy she'd imagined would mean anything to grown men weathered by war and loss. But as she watched a Marine named Dan, silent, stiff, his hands scarred and shaking, approach Briscoe, she saw his defenses crumble. Briscoe nuzzled Dan's shoulder, standing quietly while the man cried without a word, relief and sorrow pouring out. That evening, Emily sat on the porch with Maggie and Henry, watching the sunset burn orange and pink over the fields. The yard was full of laughter and low voices as the children and veterans lingered, swapping stories and feeding carrots to the horses. "We're really doing it, aren't we?" Maggie said, her voice full of wonder. Emily nodded, her heart full. "We are. This is what Mom wanted. Not just for us, to help other people too." Henry, sitting quietly in his rocking chair, smiled at his daughters. "Your mother would be proud. She always said this ranch was bigger than any one of us." Maggie grinned, tucking her feet beneath her. "Think we could take in more horses, Em? There's talk about a couple Mustangs out near Devil's Ridge, wild, scared, but maybe—" Emily laughed, looking at Briscoe dozing in the shade. "If Briscoe can heal, so can they, and so can we." The next weeks brought more visitors, more work, and more hope. The barn filled with the sounds of new horses, some rescued from auction, some brought by owners who didn't know where else to turn. The Carter family learned as they went, making mistakes, forgiving themselves and building a community around the old barn and the stubborn spirit of their land. People in town who'd once pitied or avoided the Carters now sent letters of thanks. They donated supplies, time, and stories of their own losses. It turned out nearly everyone carried wounds, some visible, some not, and somehow the ranch helped them begin to heal. Emily started a journal, recording every story and every small victory. She wrote about the first time Jesse rode Briscoe, the first time Dan laughed, the way Maggie taught a skittish foal to trust. She wrote about Henry, too, how he learned to open up, to love his daughters out loud, and to find purpose in mending more than just fences. And as the ranch grew, so did Emily's confidence that her family's brokenness was not the end, but the beginning of something far bigger. Each day brought new challenges, but also new proof that love, steady, imperfect, and stubborn, could change lives. One night, as the stars blazed bright and Briscoe led the new foals through the pasture, Emily realized that they had truly begun again. The past wasn't erased, but it no longer defined them. The Carter Ranch, once haunted by loss, now pulsed with hope, laughter, and the promise that even the deepest wounds could become the strongest bridges. It had been nearly a month since the Carter's ranch was reborn, not in the image of the past, but in the living hope of something new. Emily stood by the old pasture fence at sunrise, her journal in hand, watching the morning mist burn off the fields. The air was cool, alive with the rustling of horses and the distant call of a mockingbird. Briscoe grazed nearby, his coat now sleek and shining, scars a map of battles survived. The other horses, rescues, strays, and a couple of spooked Mustangs milled close, drawing calm from Briscoe's presence. Emily marveled at the change in him and in herself. The barn had become a gathering place. Twice a week, the Carters opened their doors to kids and veterans, welcoming anyone who needed a place to belong. Sometimes the sessions were lively and filled with laughter. Other days, the healing was quieter. A soft hand on a trembling muzzle, a story shared in hushed tones. Silent tears wiped away in the shelter of Briscoe's neck. That morning, Emily called Maggie out to the pasture, waving her over with a smile. Maggie brought her notebook and a basket of apples for the horses, settling in beside her sister on the split-rail fence. "Read me what you wrote," Maggie said, nudging Emily gently. Emily opened her journal, heart full, and began to share her reflections, not just for Maggie, but for the handful of children and adults who had joined them for the day's session, waiting in a quiet semicircle. The therapy group was a patchwork of stories. Jesse, the shy boy who now giggled when Briscoe nudged him. Dan, the veteran whose face had softened. Mrs. Lambert, a widow who just needed somewhere to be. "I used to think forgiveness meant letting someone off the hook," Emily began, her voice steady but emotional. "But what I've learned, what Briscoe and this ranch have taught me, is that forgiveness is really about setting yourself free. When you hold on to anger or regret, it's like carrying a saddle full of stones. You can't move forward. You can't heal." She paused, feeling the weight of her own words, and looked at Maggie, whose eyes brimmed with tears. "When Mom died, I tried to run from the pain," Emily continued, "and Dad tried to lock it away, but it just followed us. It built walls between us, walls I thought would never come down. But then Briscoe showed us that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means facing what hurts and choosing to love anyway." Maggie sniffled, nodding, her fingers twisting the strap of her bag. "It's still hard some days." Emily smiled, putting an arm around her. It always will be, Mag. But every day we show up, every time we help another person or horse take a step forward, we get a little stronger. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just stay and try again. She looked at the group, inviting others to share. Dan, his voice rough but kind, spoke next. First time I came here, I was angry. At the world, at myself. I didn't think anything could help. But watching Briscoe, I realized even a wounded soul can learn to trust again. Maybe I can too. A young girl named Hannah, who'd been silent for weeks, reached out and stroked Briscoe's neck. When I lost my dog, I thought I'd never be happy again, but when Briscoe let me brush his mane, I felt okay for the first time in months. The group sat quietly, letting the words settle, the sounds of the ranch filling the silence. Soft nickers, the creak of the fence, the wind stirring the tall grass. Emily glanced at her journal, reading a final passage. The smallest act of kindness, a gentle touch, a kind word, even just sitting quietly with someone who's hurting, can change a life. Sometimes we wait for big, dramatic miracles. But real healing comes from the little things, repeated over and over. She closed the journal, wiping a tear from her cheek. This ranch isn't perfect, and neither are we. But we're learning. We're forgiving each other and ourselves. That's what Mom wanted for us. That's what Briscoe has taught me. Maggie squeezed her hand. I think she'd be proud. Emily nodded, feeling her mother's presence in the golden light, in the breath of the horses, in the laughter that now echoed from the barn each afternoon. She knew that the work they were doing wouldn't erase the past, but it would transform it, weaving loss and pain into the fabric of something beautiful and strong. As the session ended and the group drifted away, kids waving, veterans nodding, Mrs. Lambert promising to bring cookies next week, Emily stayed by the fence a moment longer, watching the herd move as one. Briscoe led the way, every step a testament to the power of compassion, of second chances. The Carter Ranch had become a sanctuary, not just for animals, but for hearts that needed a place to heal. Emily realized that her greatest fear, the fear of being broken forever, had given way to something much stronger, the courage to begin again, and to help others do the same. Every scar, every memory, every hard-won lesson was now part of their legacy, proof that the deepest wounds could lead to the brightest beginnings. The first rays of morning painted the fields in gold, the air shimmering with promise as another Texas day began. Emily stood in the kitchen, barefoot and peaceful, brewing coffee in her mother's old pot. She looked out through the window as the mist clung to the pasture, and Briscoe, bold and proud, led a line of young foals across the open grass. Their coats glistened, their eyes bright, each step a living testament to resilience and hope. For a moment, Emily closed her eyes and simply listened. The low nickers of the horses, the creak of the porch swing as Maggie padded outside, Henry's quiet footsteps in the hallway. The Carter house, once so empty and haunted, now pulsed with laughter and life. It felt like the world itself was breathing along with them. As the sun crested the horizon, the family gathered on the porch, mugs in hand, blankets draped over their shoulders. Briscoe lifted his head, watching them, then whinnied, a deep, joyful sound that echoed across the land. The new foals pranced at his side, kicking up their heels, their innocence filling the air with a magic Emily had once thought lost forever. Maggie was the first to break the silence, her voice soft with wonder. Look at them, Em. All those babies. If Mom could see this. She does, Henry said, his voice steady. She's here every day, in the horses, in us. Emily smiled, feeling that truth settle inside her like the sunrise itself. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. New arrivals to the ranch, therapy sessions filled with laughter and sometimes tears, neighbors dropping off bags of feed or jars of wildflower honey. The Carter Ranch had grown beyond its old boundaries, past being just a place into a living community, a home for every lost and searching soul that wandered its way. She thought back on all they had survived, the heartbreak, the storm, the hard confessions, the long nights spent nursing Briscoe back from the edge. Every struggle had become a brick in the foundation of something enduring. And now, as Briscoe led the foals toward the barn, Emily understood at last what her mother had hoped for them. Not just survival, but the courage to thrive, to make their scars into stories, their stories into light for others. After breakfast, Emily led a walk down to the pasture for the morning's therapy group. Children ran ahead, shrieking with delight, their shadows chasing wild across the dew. Veterans walked side by side, voices low, some carrying pails of oats or armfuls of fresh hay. Maggie and Henry moved among them, greeting everyone by name. The session began with Emily reading from her mother's journal, entries about kindness, perseverance, and the gift of starting over. She saw the faces around her, young and old, reflecting hope back at her. Some bore fresh wounds, some the faint lines of old grief, but every one of them belonged here. She watched as Jesse, who once hid behind his mother's leg, now helped a nervous filly take its first steps outside. She saw Dan teaching Maggie how to braid a mane, his laughter easy and open. She saw Henry listening to a widowed neighbor, both of them leaning on the fence, sharing a silent understanding. Briscoe wandered through it all, patient and regal, a living bridge between sorrow and healing. He'd become more than a horse. He was a symbol now, a gentle guardian of their new family. The foals followed him, learning to trust by his example. As the group finished, Emily gathered everyone beneath the sprawling oak that shaded the north paddock. The breeze carried the sweet scent of clover. She stood with her family and spoke, her voice strong and clear. This ranch isn't just about horses. It's about choosing each other every day. It's about forgiveness and starting again, no matter how hard it gets. My mother taught us that every scar is a story, and every act of kindness can be a new beginning. That's what we carry forward. That's the Carter legacy. The crowd fell silent, then broke into warm applause. Emily felt the gratitude ripple through her, mingled with the ache of all they had lost and the pride in all they had built. Later, as the sun climbed higher, Emily found herself alone by the family cemetery, the grass lush and green, wildflowers blooming where her mother rested. She knelt, tracing the letters on the worn stone. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, "for teaching me to stay. For teaching me to forgive, for giving us Briscoe, and for helping us find our way home." A soft nudge startled her. Briscoe, who had wandered up the hill, lowered his head to her shoulder. She laughed, tears slipping down her face, and hugged him tight. They walked back together, and as Emily reached the barn, she looked over her shoulder one last time. The past, with all its pain, no longer weighed her down. It was part of her, yes, but so was every sunrise, every new foal, every child's laugh, and every neighbor's outstretched hand. At dusk, the Carter family stood in the pasture, watching Briscoe and the foals run wild and free. Emily knew, deep in her bones, that their story, her mother's legacy, would outlast them all. It would ripple through every healed heart, every second chance, every act of stubborn love that grew from these fields. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about choosing to heal together, about rising each day to face the past, to forgive, to begin again. It was about turning every ending into the start of something beautiful and brave. And so, beneath the boundless Texas sky, with Briscoe at their side and hope in their hearts, the Carters stepped forward into the light, scarred, strong, and finally, at home.